Hey, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you stopping on by to my little corner of the internet. Today, we are going to do some fun, sciencey, plant-themed lady sketches, and I really hope that you stick around to the end of the video to see the final sketches. I will be lining them and coloring them in a different video. That aside, if you decide to get creative alongside me, I would love to hear about it down in the comments below. Or if you feel comfortable tagging me, sharing it with me on private messages or anything like that, I would love to support the people who sit through my videos and support me. So with all that being said, let's just get into the fun part of the video and skip the boring intro stuff. There's been a running theme recently in my critiques for my MFA program that I really need to make something like an oracle deck or a tarot deck, and I know nothing about oracle cards or tarot cards. I do own an oracle deck because the art is just so pretty. Then I also really love Loish's art gallery in a box that she came out with earlier this year. And so I have been thinking and planning to work on a kind of semi-themed, big, kind of multi-year long project where I slowly work on creating little drawings that kind of thematically would go in some sort of oracle deck or a kind of art gallery in a box system where everything feels cohesive enough that it's not too jarring as you go through it, but representative of me as an artist and kind of the work I like to create, and thus, it's like me in a box, right? And yeah, that just sounds really cute and really fun, and it's something that I would really love to do. And I have one teacher in particular who's like all for it. She's like, please do it. I want you to. You need to do it. It's like perfect for you. And so whether this actually like comes to fruition in a couple of years, I actually create enough art to, go in it and have a cohesive set and it maintains a quality that I'm proud of is like up in the air. But I want to start framing the way I work on intentional pieces with this idea that I'm going to create something bigger with it, There's going to be something more for my art and more for me beyond the singular moment of creation, which I mean is like multiple hours a lot of the time, but I hope that that kind of makes sense. And so when I think about who I am as an artist and who I am as a person, what I know of myself as an artist and a person at least, I think science, pretty women, plants, and nudity. Ooh, I love my personality. So great. So, what better way to kind of approach art creation, and creating something that's indicative of me than to create kind of science-themed, mostly commonly nude, floral, pretty ladies, right? And I mean, I might create some men or masculine presenting or more androgynous people here and there throughout the project as I kind of develop my skill set, but as it stands, I feel the most confident drawing women. And I think that's because what we see as a typical female body is a little bit more lax or kind of adaptable than what we see as a typical masculine body. And I think that's because women are associated with having kind of more curves and more dimension to them than men. Men kind of are associated artistically with having a kind of blockier, more firm sort of figure. And that kind of makes it easier for me to have kind of lax intentions and kind of a loose feel to myself when I'm creating, because I don't feel like I'm obligated to try and present a masculine character. I'm able to be fluid with the curves and the approach of creating the form, and then it just kind of generally falls more feminine, right? Which is something that I just need to work on breaking out of the mindset of as I go and things of that nature. But with that kind of aside, I want to start with just kind of more traditionally feminine bodies, kind of nice curves, and, more squishy, just if you're very classically feminine, right? And then from there, I want to kind of branch out and hopefully kind of explore a little bit more how I want to draw more masculine and more non-binary characters, and then kind of bring that into the project as I go. Because I do have non-binary characters, right? One has a very femme presenting body, my other one has a masculine presenting body. That is their biological sex, but they generally are fluid with their pronouns and how they identify and how they're willing to dress and stuff like that. But they don't have any particular desire to kind of hide their body, right? I hope that kind of makes sense, that they just feel very comfortable with themselves, but they don't identify with any sort of norm or standard. And that is partially and largely because one of them is a kind of Victorian time aged male scientist, biologically male scientist, and they kind of effectively married a woman, went through the grief process when they became immortal and she passed on, and they've had time to kind of watch as society and the perceptions of sex, sexuality, and gender evolve. And as that continued to evolve, they realize that with how it's ever changing, they can't really feel comfortable strictly identifying within the singularity of it. Because as one gets oppressed and the other one loses rights or things of that nature, they just don't feel like they belong in the one, right? And that's kind of something that I intentionally did with them as a character, Vivian, or V, because I feel like it's a very interesting concept to think about. Does your perception of gender and sex change when you've lived through so many long-lasting changes and you've lived through literally complete revolutions of how people of different sexes are treated within different spheres? And that's just because I want to play with that narrative that I've kind of approached that kind of idea. Then additionally, when it comes to Eris, they are the reincarnate slash resurrected body possessed by a Greek goddess generally, but I also don't believe that gods would stick to one sex unless it's really, really innate and mandatory for the stereotype of who they are, right? And I think I talked about this in a video or two ago, probably 2 videos ago, but goddesses like Hera, who is kind of the goddess of motherhood and the home and things like that, and her being a woman is very innate to the way we associate her responsibility within that position, right? And her femininity is kind of central to the way she presents herself. An additional goddess like this is Artemis, where she is very firm in her abstinence, her lack of sex, attraction to man, her devotion to her women, her hunters, and her complete unwillingness to ever engage with a man in that capacity is very important to her and her lore and her existence within the kind of Greek mythology. So those are really the only characters where I exist very firmly that they actually very much value a certain sexual orientation or identity. Other than that, I believe that there's a lot of fluidity that is possible, and that perhaps it's not right to hold them to something specific, especially when you've lived for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of years, right? Like Eris, right? And also a god of chaos. You can't tell me that they wouldn't dress however they need to and present however they need to manifest the absolute most desirable form of chaos possible, right? I just don't believe it, but that's also an aside. So I want to kind of work in drawing more non-binary bodies as a part of the process, and that's just because I need to, or I'm not starting with it because I want to practice it more and kind of figure out the line between feminine and masculine, that I really kind of change my art style to accommodate the body. I hope that makes sense, but I feel like you have a strict way that you draw certain things once you have a developed art style, and how that kind of manifests is through practicing the thing, right? And so I'm of the belief that the more I draw kind of more masculine presenting bodies and more kind of androgynous bodies, I will figure out exactly what feels natural to me, and it'll become a more convenient slash not intentional process. And I want to do that before I create something that is specific to this long-running project, because I really want this to be art that I am proud of, at least in the moment that I create it. And when I know I have a shortcoming, like my ability to draw bodies that do not have boobs, which is really honestly the issue between masculine and feminine for me, is that I just want everyone to have boobs. I just really like the curve, and it's very much kind of a strict aspect of how I define the human body and break up the way I do anatomy. Is the arch of where they would split, kind of meet in the middle, is a large part of how I kind of think about the human body. So not having them just like short circuits my tiny little brain. But I want to figure out how I want to do it before I create something, because what if I'm not proud of it? And I want to at least feel confident in my ability. And so it's not that I'm not going to do it, it's that I want to very intentionally practice first. That lovely long-winded tangent aside, I think that there is finally enough on screen for me to explain this one of the two ladies that I will be drawing today. This one I'm thinking about calling Cellular Restoration. And so it's not super easy to tell at this exact moment, but I'm kind of partway through the process of drawing a lot of these kind of flooby textures coming from her. I'm super professional and I know how to use my words. But basically it's kind of bubbly. It kind of looks like she's melting. I haven't gone through and like erased all of the parts where her skin would be going into these and kind of moving, kind of flowing out of her quite yet, but it's all supposed to be effectively leaving her or coming into her. I'm kind of torn on if I want to draw leaving and coming in at the same time, because that's not really how cellular restoration works. And I think it'll end up being a little bit too busy and distracted if I do it that way. So I'm kind of hoping to approach maybe having it coming away, having like gaps in the body eventually, where you can then see what are like kind of very artistically liberal approaches to the skin kind of repairing itself, right? Because I'm trying to show kind of the process of how effectively we restore ourselves as creatures, and our cells kind of die and get replaced over the years, right? It's a multi-year process for all of your cells to like die off and everything, but your cells are dying and being regenerated and replaced every single day, right? Your scrapes don't take years to heal, and they're replaced by new cells, right? And that's something that I find really fun. And I feel like this is a really easy start to my kind of science ladies, right? Cellular restoration is something I can be very kind of not strict with, I guess would be the best way of putting it. Like, there isn't some like super difficult component to the scientific process that's necessary for it to make sense to a broad audience, right? I don't need to kind of explain a bunch of different steps for cellular restoration. People kind of just understand that their cuts heal and that's new cells kind of taking over, right? You're not like eternally missing that one thing forever, that hole for that scrape, right? And so I feel like it's a good start, and it's a good place for me to kind of get my footing with figuring out how I want to present this information and kind of approach it. But basically, she's a little goo creature losing her cells and kind of restoring herself in a rapid process, right? And it's kind of cute. I kind of like it. I'm thinking a blue and orange, or a kind of like purple and pinkish color palette for this so far. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not dead set on any kind of color scheme at the moment. I know that I want something moody, kind of macabre, something that kind of strikes a chord in a like more darker, somber sort of emotion, some mauve-y colors, not a sharp, harsh red, because those are very distracting, and I don't generally work with red very well, but like purples and kind of deep blues, nothing super vibrant. And that's because I very much wanted to add an extra layer of kind of emotion and drama to the process, right? Because this is something that wouldn't just kind of happen spontaneously. You know, there's an injury for a lot of cellular restoration on a visible level. Visible as in you can't see the cells being restored, but like your wound healing, right? And so I wanted it to look like she'd just been struck by something or some major bodily damage had occurred for her cells to be kind of the old ones to be leaving so that the new ones can come in. Something, a pose that indicates something kind of intense and harsh happened to the physical form for this to be occurring. So that's why I have the head thrown back, the hair kind of flaying in the wind, an arch. You know, there's supposed to be the implication of an impact, and I don't really want that impact to be illustrated, is like what it is. I don't want any sort of like actual intentional gore to it. By the way, when my video is blurry, I'm so sorry. I promise it does not stay out of focus for long. But I don't want any sort of super intense graphic imagery of the injury. I want to just focus on the scientific process I'm trying to present, or the plant that I'm trying to represent, or kind of the little plant person I'm just creating, because I want my plant zombies in here. I love my plant zombies. They are kind of a staple of my art creation, and it just doesn't feel right to do anything that has none of them in it. Thus, the next drawing that you will see in the video is just a little plant zombie doodle. I don't know how committed I am to the composition. I did it pretty small because I'm not entirely certain if I want the plan to, you know, go into this final kind of like project, and the cellular restoration piece is the one that I care the most about this kind of past week that I've been creating and kind of getting up to things. And so, you know, it's the one that I wanted to take up a full page and be the most kind of important looking of everything that I've done this week. And so that's the one that I'm most kind of optimistic about. So if there are any particular opinions for improvement or thoughts on the piece, please do let me know. I thrive off of kind of critique and kind of, you know, engagement in regards to how I can improve. You know, it's kind of the fun part about being an artist on the internet is if you have the kind of, I don't want to say have the backbone. I don't think it's fair to say have the backbone. It's when you have such a nice community, critique when it does come is generally quite nice and respectful, unlike how it can be when you're in kind of other platforms off of YouTube, you know, where things can get a little bit more vitriolic and people are generally just a little bit more unkind. But, you know, I thrive off of critique when it comes to YouTube because I generally find people are so much nicer over here and kind. So, you know, if you have any thoughts or opinions or kind of interpretations of cellular restoration that maybe is perhaps different or should be taken into account, please do let me know. I feel like this is a concept that I can very much run with, but it is something that I can definitely rework and create something different altogether, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out better. You know, maybe I need to do cellular restoration twice. Maybe this is a big piece that will kind of evolve into something more later, but I don't know. I'm very fond of how it's turning out, and per usual, I am using green. I don't know what it's been with me recently, but that kind of like no sharpening, never usable, how are they described? They're the pencils that are like, you never need to refill them, except they come with like a refill tip, which is so dorky. Like at least commit to your bit if you're gonna be like, you never need to refill. But they're kind of like a single tip pencil, you know, like how you have a digital art pen, they have replaceable nibs. That's how those kind of colored pencils, the chunky one that you see sometimes before using the smaller one, kind of looks. It's got like just a replaceable tip. Like there's nothing inside of there except maybe an eraser. It jostles when I move it, but the tip unscrews. So I think it's just an eraser. I've never actually decided to deconstruct it and investigate what that thing is actually. I prefer to use eraser that's like actually on the back of something and not kind of work with whatever. I don't know. if I have a loose eraser, I want it to be in a barrel or like rectangular. I don't want just this like oval strip of eraser. I don't feel like I can get the dexterity I want with it. I don't even like kneaded erasers for a similar reason, so I don't know, but there's just something about this green pencil where I feel like I just kind of create some really solid work whenever I whip it out. I don't know, I feel like my sketches are just better in green for some reason recently. Maybe it's like the time of the year, I'm getting excited for, you know, the seasons and the temperatures I like more. Or maybe I just kind of generally work better with a color that's less like intense and offensive on the eyes, perhaps. I know red can be a bit much, and blue is hard to find a consistent color for me. The blue of this set is a different color than the blue of my Pilot Enos, and then it's different than the shade of blue for my Pilot Eno refill for some reason. I don't know. I just really like these two green pencils. They've been kind of just like my go-to recently. I really love them, and I feel like I'm getting like just such good sketches consistently when I'm using these. And then when I pull out pen or pencil, I've just been kind of feeling down about my art when I do it. So I don't know. It's this weird kind of dichotomy, but I don't know. And you know, maybe it's partially because the not refillable, the like not need to refill pencil. I have no idea what they're called. They don't have branding on the side, which usually is something where I'm like, I don't trust a brand if they don't put their name on the side of something. Usually I'm like, is this drop shipped from somewhere? But I got them at a store, so I'm not sure why a store would sell them, like, if they're questionable, but I don't know. There's no branding on them. They're just this pencil, right? I think a part of why I get such good kind of sketches out of them is because there's such a broad nib. I can't go in and add details, so I have to be fluid and kind of relaxed with my decisions, and I can't be picky in the actual sketching moment, right? I'm incapable of being like, oh, but I want all of these minute tiny details in the sketch, and I have to just think big picture, shape, composition, filling the space, and how I actually want to kind of present that baseline information as opposed to the broader thing as a whole. If you've been sitting here this long, you probably either like my content and are liking the sketches and listening to me talk, or you've been here a while and so you're familiar with the fact that I am a rambler and I'm incapable of shutting up. So I just really briefly wanted to pop in and do a little channel update that says, hey, as you can probably tell, I recorded this video over the course of like 6 days, 6 days. I don't even know, which is highly abnormal. I very rarely work on a sketch for more than a day. I'm usually done. So I've been very busy this week. It's going to be a very busy next 2 weeks, which is why you've probably also noticed that this video is about half the length of my usual videos. I know if you're new here, half the length, 36 minutes is short for me. And that's because I've just gotten a very big project thrown my way for the internship I'm doing for a sustainability company. And it's very important, and it's been taking up a lot of my time. My anniversary happened, and we celebrated it this week instead of last week when our anniversary was, and then I'm going to a concert next week, to which I plan to do some sort of little vloggy process of the sketching that I'm doing, if I get to sketch at all. But basically, I've just been really swamped with, like, kind of life events recently. Also, my cat's asthma diagnosis is official. She did get better on the steroids, and she will be getting a kitty inhaler next week on Wednesday. We're picking up her drugs. I'm buying the face implementation so that she can kind of inhale her, cat drugs. So, yeah, it's just been kind of a lot recently. And so the video's short, so I hope you guys can accept that. And then secondarily, the camera is not in focus as much, and I'm just having a little bit of issues kind of like getting my work kind of in frame and looking as good as usual. I promise it'll be better next week, or at the very, very least the week after, so I'm hoping that it kind of slide for today. I also had my massive MFA critique last week, and then I'm starting a whole new round the week after, and then Thanksgiving holidays are coming up, and, things in the world have been a little bit rough. I'm an American, as you may or may not know, so, all of that's been going on. So at the very least, it's going to be a bit more of a kind of casual, slow kind of week for me. Next week is going to be also kind of in the same vein, but I hope everybody's taking care of themselves and is staying safe with all the things considered, regardless of what country you're in, what's going on there. I hope everybody is, okay with all the situations going on, and I would appreciate it if everybody can kind of keep kind of any violence or vitriol out of my comment section regarding the current circumstances. I know that it's very hard. I'm a safe space, but I would prefer to be a safe space privately where people are not exposing themselves to argument or kind of any situation that might present a public kind of backlash against people, because this is a very sensitive topic. So if you feel the need, feel free to private message me. If you're comfortable with how things can get publicly, feel free. My poor French viewer is probably like, what is happening? We love my French viewer. We do. Hello. But, yeah, with all of that being said, it's a bit of a slow week, a short video, all of that fun shenanigan and pizzazz, but, I will be back to things pretty soon, and, I'm kind of, I don't know, I've mentioned that I'm kind of finally, like, out of the kind of, art block isn't the right word, but, art block, where I just felt like my art was bad. I'm finally feeling like my art's good again, and so I'm kind of settling into things. I'm expecting to produce some pretty solid projects pretty soon. I'm really liking my art again, and I'm having this, like, intense, overwhelming bodily desire to create, like, a bunch, like an absolute bunch of, like, little floating island things based on my video from last week, which if you haven't seen it, I don't know how you got recommended this one and not that one. That one's, like, getting seen by people, which is, like, insane and terrifying. It's been a while since the video's been, like, vomited on by the YouTube algorithm, but yeah. So I do an art and an imagination and creativity exercise in my last video, and I created little robot guys and a slime gunk. I don't know where the slime gunk came from, in like a money bag. I don't know what he was doing there either. Most of it looks like kind of mechanical floating islands, and I'm kind of hoping to do more floating island sketches in the near future, at least for a creativity exercise thing. And so I'm definitely thinking that I'm, like, getting into the swing of things again, and you guys are going to be seeing some great stuff from me soon. I feel like I'm a marketing person and not, like, an artist who just kind of goblins everywhere, because, like, when have I ever been, like, a professional that actually, like, does things? But yeah, I think we're getting to the point where I can start talking about my plant person, which I'm in love with, so let's get to it. I've drawn my plant people kind of standing around, just kind of, I don't know, being standing, sentient, stiff entities for a minute now, and I think it's finally time that I, like, have personality with them, right? Because, a lot of the warm-ups, or the previous projects have been me kind of exploring the actual, like, fundamental design to them, how I want them to exist, clothing, if there are any, if clothing makes sense, things like that. Because, like, when you first pass on, you're probably dressed, maybe not, depending on the circumstances, all of those, not so fun details. But when you have lived long enough after being brought back from the dead to, like, have literal fully blown plants growing out of you, your clothes are starting to degrade, or they've snagged on things and torn over time. You're not fully in control or fully sentient of yourself as a human. This project is supposed to be kind of a metaphor for chronic illness, a way of kind of conveying what happens when you have a condition that takes over the body and kind of takes over you as a person and who you were and who you're going to become, and it starts to dictate aspects of your life, right? This is a representation of what it's like to not really completely be yourself anymore, right? And that's a large part of the narrative, and so you don't really, maintain yourself in your clothes the same way anymore, and that's a large part of why I spent so much time working on just kind of front-facing illustrations and stuff like that. And I have an unfinished one that I made on my channel months ago. I never finished the background, that's basically it. That I do need to finish and really kind of cement the official first full, proper, done installment into the kind of series. But now I want to have kind of a little bit more personality and dimension to the characters, pose, kind of a ability or an implication that interaction is going to occur, right? That these are approachable beings that you can interact with. Whether or not they'll respond to you might depend on if they can still communicate verbally, with plants being like part of their actual physical body and all of that. But like it's it's really becoming kind of like something new, right? A new entity, and whether or not you communicate is maybe 50-50. I'm not even sure if I want them to have that capacity. They're supposed to be kind of stewards of the forest now. Kind of individual personal ecosystems for all of the plants that have found home within them. Also, I will get my elbow out of the screen momentarily. I just needed to lean in to do the hair and the face, but I promise it'll be out of the way in a moment. But they're trying to kind of become this almost nymph of the forest, or the plants are trying to make them into one. And so with that, I don't know how much communication is an option, but I want them to look like something you can approach, something that exists within nature that you can show up to and walk up to and see it and interact with it and touch it. And these are real physical creatures. And part of what makes that a possibility is, first off, the gaze. Gaze, not the gaze, like Gays. The gaze is the kind of art history terminology for kind of you as the viewer and how you are enticed into looking at the image and interacting with it based on how the artist kind of positioned everything and the information and the narrative that's being kind of shown to you, right? So with the gaze, I now want to kind of think more intentionally about how I'm placing my characters within a frame and creating this feeling or environment where it feels like you can walk into it, or it feels like there's something more happening that kind of itches your brain to make you think some more, right? I do like illustrations that exist for the sole purpose of being strictly beautiful and, the character design, and that is a central component, and that is what makes you think. But when it comes to my plant zombies, because they do kind of exist in a universe, right? And I want them to exist in a universe like my original characters do, I do want to start working on incorporating backgrounds or enough of a kind of implied environment to them or pose that it allows people to sit with them longer and think about them more and feel more comfortable kind of engaging with the work for a longer period of time. Because while I want them to be beautiful, I want people to think as well. And that's partially because they're like a metaphor for illness, and I want people to take the time to really think about it, think about what this implies for self-autonomy, chronically ill people like myself, and how this like implicates other people in the lives of chronically ill people. Like, how can you, with this art now, think about the people in your life who have illnesses or disabilities, and how can you start to maybe be there for them in a further way? Because I feel like people who don't really realize what it's like to have a chronic illness don't realize how important it is to just exist there for the people in your life that have them, how hard it is to kind of move on from people who forget about you and let you fade into the background, because it just kind of happens when you can't go out as much, go as many places, or commute independently, and you kind of become a second thought, and slowly you're not thought about at all anymore, right? And so I want to create work that helps people kind of see not a beauty in chronic illness, because it's awful and it sucks and there's nothing fun about it, but kind of see humanity and kind of find a better way of kind of digesting the information. Because I feel like when you're trying to explain, specifically for myself, an invisible illness is like, I swear I'm not crazy. I swear I'm feeling something. You just can't see that I'm feeling something. And I want to make that a visual thing so that people can kind of better digest the information. And thus, I want to create work that engages people and makes them think about it a little bit more, instead of just processing, oh, this is pretty, and then moving on, which is still really nice, but as an artist, I want to create something that forces people to think some more about the message I'm trying to present with this specifically, because this is something that's so important to who I am as a person and an artist, and it's how I found my love of art in the first place, was creating art for the sake of feeling better and finding catharsis for my mental health conditions at the time. And now this is my catharsis as I kind of learn to accept life with my now diagnosed chronic illness, which was at the time misdiagnosed, right? And so I want to start working on creating narratives that make people kind of sit with my work a little bit longer, right? Per usual, I seem to be like physically incapable of talking little enough that then I cannot, like, I have time for a proper, like, good outro where I summarize my final thoughts and all of that. So ultimately, I would really love to know what you guys think about me doing kind of like an oracle card slash series where I'm like working on trying to kind of create art that just looks really good together at the end. And then I also kind of hope to know if you guys like the illustrations at all, if you want to see more science ladies, because oof, science ladies. But ultimately, I would appreciate it if you like, dislike if you dislike, and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, absolutely wherever you are. And with all of this being said, bye-bye!